If you take 25 grams of creatine, it's going to improve cognitive performance. I think creatine is one of the things where it's accessible, it's affordable, and now there are additional health benefits coming out from it.
You don't really need much equipment. All you need is a pair of shorts and some shoes, and you can run. I can't imagine a future in 20 years where footwear is not instrumental with technology. There's a massive opportunity to guide people to run better, to run more efficiently, to guess less, and to reduce the risk of injury and help them reach their performance goals more efficiently.
Welcome to this week's episode of Lifts. I'm Matthew Januszek. I'm here with my co-host, Mo Iqbal. Mo, how are you doing today in Chicago?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm at front of the podcast hotel, Midtown Hotel in Chicago. And the friend we're speaking about is John Brady. I don't know if we've had John as a guest on the pod, have we?
I don't think we have, no. But he's been sort of threatening me that I should come and stay at his hotel for a while. So you have to tell me what it's like at some point.
Well, typically this is, I think, my third or fourth time staying in the hotel. It's nicely done. The best thing about it is that you've got full access to their flagship gym here in Chicago, which is, if people have not been, it is tremendous. I think it's one of my favorite gyms in the country. In fact, I'm staying here with a couple of colleagues and we're walking in and I said, this is a real treat. It's one of my favorite gyms in the country. And they've got a restaurant here. They have a spa here. And it's pretty close to downtown Chicago. So whenever I'm in town, if I don't need to be downtown in Chicago, I always opt to stay at Midtown. But this kind of is a continuation of some travel, which I've had. I was in Asia last week and in Tokyo and then Kuala Lumpur on a very quick turnaround, which is always challenging when you're traveling. I think you just came back from vacation. But Matthew, you sent me a link on Instagram, which I actually put to use. So it was really timely. You sent me a link around creatine and loading up on creatine when you are sleep deprived. I was a bit skeptical. I take creatine about 5 grams a day, maybe 10 some days. But I've never kind of loaded up on 25 grams. So what this post that you sent me talks about is that if you are sleep deprived, which I was, and you have all the effects of it with brain fog and low energy, that if you take 25 grams of creatine, it's going to improve cognitive performance and your energy levels, which is what I did. So I said, okay, let me take this. And so for that week, I actually took 25 grams of creatine per day. And I have to tell you, it was really helpful. So thank you for that tip. It was timely. I put it to use. And I'm curious, since you sent it to me, have you actually tried it?
I haven't. No, I just went and disappeared for a week in Mexico, but I would like to pick it up because I've not been doing creatine really. I have some that's in my there's a pre and post workout thing that I take, which doesn't have anywhere near enough what it suggests that you take. But I was curious, what brand of creatine did you take? Did you do any research in choosing a particular brand? And I'm guessing there's different qualities that provide different results as well, I would have thought.
Yeah, so I took one. So I got the post while I was in transit. So I had a container of creatine with me, which is from a company called Pillar Performance. And I might have spoken about them before, but I also take their magnesium supplement. They've got this supplement called triple magnesium, which I take before I go to sleep. So I just it's a good thing I had half a container left, but that's kind of what I loaded up on to 25 grams. I don't recommend taking it. I don't think you could stay at that dose for a sustained period. But it's interesting, right? I don't think we've ever covered creatine recently, but you and I have probably been taking creatine on and off for the last 25 years, maybe even longer, but mostly as a strength tool. But now there's all these benefits of creatine which are coming out, which have all these additional health benefits to it. The best thing about it too is that it's still one of the more affordable supplements. So when you're looking at, we've talked about things like NAD drips as an example, where the science is still being baked. And it's also very costly. It's a supplement which is at a premium. I think creatine is one of the things where it's accessible, it's affordable, and now there are additional health benefits coming out from it. So
I don't know if you follow James Smith, PT, either of you, but he's done a few very interesting posts on creatine gummies in particular, because there's a lot of these new gummies coming out, which I guess it's an easy way to get the amount of creatine that they're saying you need nowadays. But he's been testing a lot of the most popular brands that are out there, really, and finding that the amount of creatine in them is not at all what's been sort of published on the packaging. So yeah, I think it's an interesting space, but it seems as though there's a lot of scams going on in the area, as usual. So maybe we need to find a creatine expert at some point and get them on to do a deep dive.
Yeah, well, we should. But look, having things in a candy format, like you just talked about, is the reason why, as a country, we are now taking more vitamins than we have ever before. And it was because we transitioned from pills and powder to these candy or chewable formats. And that's led to this explosion of everyone taking taking more vitamins than ever before. But I think the efficacy so think about this. Someone mentioned to me creatine as well, right? But if you were to chew that 25 grams of chewable creatine versus a powder, I mean, that's a lot of, right? That's quite a bit to take on, and I don't know what 25 grams looks like, whether it even in a capsule format. So I've just been opting for the powder format. But look, today we are talking about something which I do quite a bit. Matthew, you do a lot as well, which is running, and we are both runners. And there's been a boom recently in running, especially post-pandemic. But before we get to that, I'm excited to have someone who I consider a friend. I'm an advisor to his company. And the guest is Royi Metser, who's the founder and CEO of Avelo Running. He is behind the company of what people are calling the world's first truly smart shoe. And I want to get into that in a minute. Roy's background includes time at Inside Tracker, which is actually how we first met. And now he's leading this startup, Avelo Running, which just blew past his Kickstarter goal in record time. So I want to chat about that as well. But Roy, welcome to Lifts.
Thank you, Mo. It's great to see you, and thanks for having me.
Running's an interesting thing. Like, as I'm in my mid-50s now, and it's something that's been around in my sort of, I guess, fitness, if you call it, routine forever. Like I sort of came off the back of the original running phase, which was probably sort of like late 80s, when everybody started to run, and you know, it was almost like the first big wave of fitness that I can remember in my lifetime. And it seems to have gone through so many different phases. And as we're preparing for this podcast today, I was just putting some stuff into chat to see what's popular in that space. And there seems to be all of these running clubs. Last week, Mo and I chatted about the Diplo one, which I thought was a bit of a one of a kind, but apparently there's a lot more. There's the Venice Run Club in Los Angeles. There's the Cool Down Run Club, which apparently is operating in 11 cities as this sort of social club disguised as a run club. There's another one in Texas called the MBTX Club. There's one in London called the Say Yes Club. And it seems to be driven by a lot of the younger generation that are using it as an alternative to actually go out and meet other people instead of going to places like bars and nightclubs, which is what happened in my days. So I'm just curious from your perspective, Roy, what are you seeing in this? If we zoom out and look at the space as a whole, what are some of the trends that you're seeing? Not necessarily just related to your product, because I'm aware that it is sort of relatively specialist. But like, what are you seeing in the space that probably people that are listening may not be as aware of, that are starting to develop at the moment?
It's been probably 50 years of growth in running. It started actually back in the 70s, if you go all the way back to the first, what people consider to be the first running boom, at least in the US. And it was driven by a coach named Arthur Lydiard, who was actually Bill Bowerman, one of the co-founders of Nike, went over there and observed, Arthur Lydiard, who's a legendary running coach. And Bill Bowerman came back to the US and wrote a book called Jogging. And it was the first time that people started to actually run for fitness, like go out and just jog. And that was in the 70s. And the US, it really took off as a recreational form of fitness in the 70s and grew from there over the course of the next few decades. That was kind of the first running boom. And then, we're in the midst of what I think many consider to be, and you touched on it, of a second running boom. And that was in part accelerated by the coronavirus pandemic. It was actually what led me to find running personally. And so I'm one of the people who is newly participating in this community more, at least much more actively in the last, call it 5 or 6 years. And I think there's a lot of people just like me who found running as a primary form of fitness, or something that they want to have goals around and really train for during the pandemic or shortly thereafter. And then it's really exploded in growth and continues to from there. We're seeing participation in races continue. I mean, you're seeing almost every single major marathon break attendance and registration records over the prior few years. You're seeing Run Club participation explode, and Strava publishes a lot of good reports on the participation because they just have so much good data on this. You're seeing a younger generation of runners as well. So the sport is being driven, or the popularity is being driven in large part by Gen Z, and in particular, women are participating in the sport much more than they did in the past. And so, yeah, it's really we're in the middle of the second running boom, and there doesn't seem to be an end in sight. And of course, that leads to a lot of great communities, a lot of great innovation, and so we're part of that wave, and aiming to. I mean, we didn't start this company because of this running boom. It's just happens to be a great time to be building for this community and this market.
You touched on the running boom really driven by Gen Z. I would even go further that it's driven by young women. And unlike some of the previous booms that we've had, some even say this might be the third one because I think we had another mini one in '08, '09 during the last financial crisis, which is also interesting because a lot of people, which is a whole different conversation, but a lot of people turn to running in times of need. It's just been such a great tool that people have used. But this one is incredibly diverse compared to the last couple of running booms. I mean, you talked about the London Marathon, Rory. The London Marathon saw over 1.1 million ballot entries this year. That is double compared to 2 years ago. And the best thing about it, though, is that it has nearly equal representation across all genders. It saw a surge in participants aged 18 to 29. And I think, influencer-based platforms like TikTok and Instagram have really played a big role in the running movement. And to your point also that it's really a post-pandemic boom that we've seen that started during the pandemic, but also then really grown post-pandemic as well. But I'm just curious, given this boom, do you think that there's going to be a boom and a bust um, the last two booms that running had? You saw this big increase come up, but then you also saw a decline in the following years. Why do you think this time might be a bit different?
Well, I think if you look at over long periods of time, running has continued to grow pretty consistently. Obviously, if you look at short periods, maybe there's spikes and short declines. But I think running has a lot of things that make it unique. One is it's a very accessible thing to do, and so I think that's why it's perhaps you could say the second most popular form of exercise in the world, maybe behind walking.
Right.
There's hundreds of millions of people, about 600 million people who participate in running globally, about 150 million people around the world who run at least once a week, and about 50 million of those are in the US, and those numbers have probably grown. There's tens of millions of people who have run a race or run a race annually in the US. So it's obviously a gigantic community and a gigantic market because it's relatively easy to get started, right? You don't really need much equipment. All you need is a pair of shorts and some shoes, and you can run. It's also something that for some reason, I think a lot of us see running as this natural thing that humans were born to do. And in many ways, that's true. Human beings have been running for a very long time. You can look back in history and you can see that there's actually forms of running called endurance hunting, where the human body was actually designed to be able to run long distances much better than other species. And so, if you read reports of running dating back, centuries and even longer, you can read about the fact that some humans used to basically try to outlast their prey by running for longer than their prey could. And so it is a very natural thing for human beings to be able to do. And so I think it's just something that, yeah, we I don't see it ever going away. Honestly, it's just it's so accessible, and obviously the health benefits are tremendous. I don't really need to go into detail there. I think anyone who runs knows that, if done correctly, you can experience tremendous improvements to your cardiovascular health and fitness, your metabolic health and fitness. Of course, if you have weight management or weight loss goals, it can be very good and in support of those objectives. And then mental health. I mean, anyone who runs knows the mental health benefits of going out for a run, and how good and clear you feel after that run compared to before it. And so, I really don't see this slowing down anytime soon. Now, of course, I'm building for this market, so you could say that I'm biased, but it's just such an accessible and beneficial form of fitness that it's never going to disappear, and it hasn't for the last 50 years. It's just continued to grow.
Many of the listeners to this podcast are involved in the gym business, where they've got physical locations, and one of the things that we've been hearing a lot, although there have been some exceptions to these claims, but we've been hearing a lot that there's a reduction in people using treadmills inside of gyms. What's your experience, if any, on that statement? Is this becoming more of a thing now that people do outside of the gym, and they're finding, particularly some of the Gen Zs, are now going to other places to have that kind of experience that they would have done with the gym, which is a little bit more social? Or do you see that this could be the beginning of that picking up back again in regular gyms, where people start training for competitions? Last week we talked a lot about high rocks, which again is, I'm sure in terms of your world is a great opportunity, because there's a huge amount of running that goes along in that, and with it, my guess is coaching people how to run effectively, and so, how do you see those two sides coming together, if at all?
It's a great question. I haven't looked too much into the data around the participation from runners on treadmills versus outdoors, and how that's changed over time. I mean, I can tell you that part of this boom, I think you touched on it. It's really driven by people's desire for social connection, and they're using run clubs as a way to connect with other individuals. And so, of course, it's great to be able to do that. Run clubs typically meet, outside, or run outside, I should say, and it's a chance to be outside, to run outside with other people, and most races are outside, and I think there's just something special about being outdoors and being in nature that running kind of forces you and allows you to do. And so you're kind of killing two birds with one stone, right? You're getting a great workout in, but you're also being out in nature, experiencing fresh air, and obviously that's a beautiful reset. I don't think treadmill running is ever going to disappear. I think especially for people who are training for a goal, or have a running related goal, a treadmill can be a great tool to have to support their training, and allow them to follow a training plan when running outdoors is obviously not feasible due to weather or any other reason, travel. I think the other thing that's happened that we've seen is trail running is exploding in popularity too. That's another sector of the running market that's experiencing tremendous outsized growth over the last few years. So people really want to be, I think, again, in nature. And so the trail running market and participation in trail running, I think it's still nascent, but that's going to continue to grow. And maybe that's pulling people out of the gym and to the trails. I'm not sure. It's hard for me to say. I think that, I don't see treadmill running ever going away. I think the treadmill hasn't been really reinvented for a long time. It's been kind of the same experience for decades. I know there's great companies that are working on innovation in improving treadmill running. So, maybe there's some great innovation on the horizon, or some that's been released in the last year or two, that can make it perhaps a more interesting experience for folks who feel like it's a little boring. So, for me, I just run outside. I mean, I can speak from personal experience. That's what I love. I love to be outside when I run. And so I think a lot of runners are like me. They just enjoy that form of the sport.
Yeah, I'm like you too, Roy, and I think Matthew too. We're mostly outside runners. I've opted for the treadmill. I think if it's too hot and I can't get a run in the
Yeah,
morning, and it's like 90 plus, or sometimes if the weather just doesn't support it, if it's like snowing a
of
lot or
course.
there's icy
Yeah.
conditions and whatnot. But I want to touch on one point here. So running, many clubs in our industry, and I posted a link about Lifetime Fitness. Lifetime Fitness has had and supported run clubs for many years. And I've been a member at Lifetime, I think going back to the 2010s, and they've always had an outdoor run club. And then you look at brands like High Rocks, which is really founded on running. So you have a lot of people who now want to compete and train for High Rocks. and find out that I'm good at the functional movements, but I'm not good at running. So they now pick up running. I've spoken to so many people who picked up running purely because of Horrocks and are trying to find ways to quantify and make that 1K divided to 8 laps to be more effective. And then even you look at retail stores like Lululemon or running shoe stores, all of them, for the most part, have some semblance of a run club. They either meet once a week or twice a week, and they meet outside the store. So it's been a great way to point where to bring community, to bring them to your store, and to kind of bring people together. I personally use running as a way to meet people too. Like if I have instead of a business meeting and having a coffee, I'm like, hey, why don't we meet in the morning and head out for a run? It's just been a great way to even conduct business. I do want to switch gears into Avelo itself. You look at, and I know you and I have talked about this for the last couple of years, but big brands like Nike and Under Armour have tried creating the smart kind of running shoe before, but they've never been able to crack mainstream adoption. What do you think is different between then and now, both in market and also the tech? Why do you have confidence that Avelo can succeed where these other big brands have not been able to do that?
Yeah, it's a question I've fielded quite a bit over the last 2.5 years, as you can imagine. I mean, dating back to 25 years ago was probably one of the first attempts that most people who are, in this industry remember, which is Nike building what they called Nike Plus. And so they did instrument footwear at the time. This is in the late 90s, early 2000s. And they created a little pod that you could insert into a compatible Nike shoe. Now, we're talking, again, before the iPhone. We're talking before GPS was really used mainstream, right? So allowing an athlete or a runner to track their pace, their distance, and their steps on a run was pretty groundbreaking at the time. And so it was actually my co-founder was the lead executive at Nike, working on this project, Nike Plus, and they partnered with Apple and they created a little adapter that you could attach at the time to an iPod and stream your data from your Nike Plus pod to your iPod, and then see all the data. And that was again 25 years ago. Ultimately, Nike's core business is not technology. That they tried a few other things. You guys probably remember the Fuel Band, and they could have. I believe, and many others I've talked to, they could have built a great wearables and technology business. I think that the Fuel Band was ahead of its time. But it's just not their core business. It's not what they're necessarily the strongest at. Even though you could argue they have endless resources, they have a core business. It's obviously they have the arguably the greatest brand in the world, and they know how to make great footwear, great apparel, and work with great athletes. Technology is not really where they're the strongest. It's also not their priority, right? They have a very successful business in apparel and footwear. And so to get a technology business off the ground and scale it to the point where it makes a meaningful impact for a company like Nike in terms of, financial performance and contribution to their revenue and profit. I mean, Nike is a 40, 50, $60 billion a year revenue company. So for an initiative like this to make an impact for them, it has to be pretty big, and it takes some time, as you guys know, to take something from a very early stage to the point where it's doing $100 million plus in revenue, and even then, for a company like Nike, it would be a drop in the bucket. So it's been tried by several footwear brands, and not almost every single time it's been tried before Avelo, it's been by one of these incumbent footwear brands. And it's your classic innovator's dilemma, right? It's not their core business. They're not serving necessarily initially their core customer. They're serving kind of the early adopter customer. And they're typically slower, they're more bureaucratic, they're more risk averse, right? So it's for all these reasons that we feel that it's a startup that's the right organization, a startup that's specifically and solely focused on creating smart footwear with the team and skills that are required to make smart footwear, not just footwear skills, which of course are required because you have to make a great shoe if you want people to use a smart shoe. But you need exceptional hardware skills and expertise. You need exceptional software and firmware engineers. And you have to be obsessed with making all of those things work seamlessly together, and then creating an experience that takes the data that comes off of this sensor that's in the shoe and then also making it useful, insightful, engaging for athletes, which I would argue is one of the hardest challenges. And so this is not an easy thing to do. It has to be your sole mission and sole focus. And it can't be an innovation project off on the side that, if it works, great. If it doesn't work, no big deal. It's got to be, honestly, life or death, which it is for us. And so we're obsessing over every single detail. And that's why one of the reasons why I believe, obviously, have great conviction that it's not because the market isn't there. It's not because it's not technically feasible. It's just that the execution hasn't been there. It hasn't been the right party that's attacked this. And we're obviously attacking it in a very different way, given that we're a startup and our sole focus is building a smart running shoe. I think the market has also changed dramatically in the last 2 decades. You guys have seen the explosion of adoption of wearable devices. So the consumer today is much different than the consumer was 20 years ago. We're used to tracking stuff about our health and performance. We actually want more information about our body to make smarter decisions about our health and performance. And so the appetite for information and insight about your body that's given to you from these sensors that you're wearing on your body is just dramatically different today than it ever has been. Obviously, I don't see that slowing down anytime soon. So, fundamentally, those are the two reasons why I believe now is the right time and we're the right player to finally make it happen. I don't think there's a future. I can't imagine a future in 20 years where footwear is not instrumented with technology. Every single other product we use is smart. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of when, not if.
It's interesting comments you make about Nike, and I've seen it over the years with a number of companies. And as you say, they were very successful with the Nike Plus and the Fuel Band and a number of other innovations. But the discipline to knock those ideas on the head and recognize that you probably not going to be able to put everything in it to have a world-class product is pretty impressive, and I guess goes to where they are as an organization. Although I am aware they're going through their own sort of changes and challenges of remaining relevant at the moment. One of the things I want to pick up on is certainly when you read the overview about your products online, you are really taking this whole concept to another level. I'm just sort of picking a few of the comments up where like one of the things that you seem to have gone into a lot of detail in is the materials that are used in a shoe that I wasn't aware of was as relevant as what it seems to be in some of your literature. The height of the sole, or the stack, I think, as you call it, and then some of the other scores that you're now recording on, which I wasn't aware. Things like this resilience score and this form radar, I believe, that you're now tracking. So probably for an uneducated person like me that's just ran for many years but doesn't really understand what should be important when it comes to my running, my running gear and what I'm tracking. Give us a very sort of high level overview of some of the key things that you've built into your product, whether that's how you've sourced it, how you've engineered the product itself to come together, and some of those things on a technology that you believe hasn't been there before, that you're building into what you're offering to the market today.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it starts with the shoe because, again, if you don't create a great shoe that's comfortable, that fits great, that performs great on the run, then no one's going to use your smart shoe. So we started by focusing on creating an exceptional shoe. And so that has really been led by my co-founder, Peter Rupi, who's has spent decades in the footwear industry, and around us has built a team of exceptional footwear developers, designers, and really experienced executives who worked with him at Nike. So Peter spent almost 30 years at Nike, led footwear for Under Armour, led footwear for Columbia Sportswear. And so the team that we have was the first step to making this possible. And so we've created what we call a super trainer. That's the category of shoe that we're making. It's actually what we've called our first shoe. And that means that it's very versatile. So it can be used for all sorts of kinds of runs, ranging from an easy jog all the way through an interval workout or even a race if you want to. And it does a really good job across all of those different types of runs. So we want it to be something that a runner can use for a wide variety of workouts. That means that it has to be really light and it has to be really comfortable, but it also has to be very responsive. And so in the footwear industry in particular, there's been tremendous materials innovation in the last 10 or so years. I know Mo is aware of this, and Matthew, I'm not sure how closely you pay attention to the running shoe market, but Nike around the year 2016 came out with a shoe called the Nike Vaporfly. And it was a shoe that used a very light and high energy return foam, which means that when you take a step on the foam, it absorbs a lot of that energy that you're generating, a lot of force that you're driving into the foam, but then it returns it back to your body. And so it allows you to efficiently propel yourself forward. And then what they did was they also stuck a carbon fiber plate in the middle of the foam. And so this really kicked off a new wave of innovation in materials and creating shoes that are super light, but also enhance performance. And some of the studies that Nike did around this shoe and some of the studies that have come out in the last 10 years or so about this technology, this combination of foam plus carbon fiber plate, have shown that it can improve what's called running economy. In other words, how efficiently you move by 4%, even more in some athletes. And so obviously that leads to faster times, and we're seeing record-breaking performances almost every year now in distance running. So we're leveraging a lot of that innovation in our footwear. So that's really number one. But then that's really only where the experience starts. So we have to make sure it's a great shoe so that we get you in the product. But then what we're measuring is a few things that have not been accessible to runners unless they go into a biomechanics lab and get a gait analysis done. And this is not dissimilar from what other wearables have done for consumers on the physiological monitoring side, right? So, I wear an Oura Ring, I wear a Garmin watch. Obviously, Whoop has become incredibly popular. We're now all monitoring our heart rate, our HRV, our sleep. And so we're able to understand our physiology really deeply and then use that to make decisions on our training and our health and our performance. This is not dissimilar. We're now making data accessible to athletes on every single step continuously that was previously inaccessible, that you'd have to go into a lab to get. And so one of those big innovations is in what we call mechanical load monitoring. So you guys run, so every time you hit the ground, there's an impact that your body is absorbing. It's an impact sport, right? So you're driving force into the ground. The ground is hitting your body back with what's called the ground reaction force. And your muscles, tendons, ligaments, bones, they have to absorb this force. It causes damage to these tissues and they have to recover from that damage. And as we all know, that's the point, right? When you recover properly, then you build back stronger, you get fitter, and you can handle more. You get faster. But if you apply too much of this mechanical load to the point where you're applying more than your body is prepared for, you're exceeding what's called your body's capacity, that's when an injury occurs. And this is a massive, massive problem. The rate of running related injury has been over 50% since the 1970s, since that first running boom you and I just talked about, for 50 years with no improvement, despite how much more we know about the human body, how much better we've gotten in terms of coaching and sports science, and obviously all the materials innovation we've talked about. Not an inch of improvement in this rate of running related injury. And one of the huge blind spots that we're missing, that we're finally making accessible to runners, is better understanding how much of this mechanical load is an athlete applying to their body. And this is ultimately what's creating that positive stimulus and adaptation that leads to improved performance, but what also is the root cause of running related injury. So that's one big category of insight that we're first of all measuring and then providing recommendations around. And I can answer any questions on that, or we can go deeper on some other elements.
Well, your first batch, and I think this validates it. I think the consumers and runners in particular largely agree. Your first batch on Kickstarter sold out in under 24 hours, which I think is also exceeded your expectations. What did that tell you about the market and kind of how you would scale from here?
Yeah, I mean, we came out of stealth. It's just been about 4 months since we actually announced publicly what we're building. Before that, obviously, Mo, you and I have been working together on this for much longer than that. But we only revealed this in at the end of March, and so over a course of 2.5 months, we built a wait list of 17,000 people who expressed interest in our product and wanted early access. And then, on Kickstarter, we launched in June, and we sold out of that first batch of about 500 pairs in under 20 hours. So we did about $100,000 in sales in under 20 hours, and that was for the earliest delivery. And so for us, that was obviously incredibly validating. I think the running market is runners are many of us are data driven. We like to track our running. We like to look at our progress, and tracking our running and using data is a way to see our progress, and it can be motivating for a lot of runners. But I think a lot of runners share my frustration, and the frustration that a lot of members of our team have, which is we feel like we're guessing too much. we feel like running is this really frustrating process of trial and error. Still, to this day, most of us who run, we kind of just put our shoes on and go. Like, I'm sure you two were never really like coached on how to run properly. Although I'm sure if you played team sports, you were. So running is this like weird thing where it's so popular, and yet most of us don't get a lot of guidance. Like, we're kind of left to figure it out on our own. And so there's a massive opportunity to guide people to run better, to run more efficiently, to guess less, and to reduce the risk of injury, and help them reach their performance goals more efficiently. And clearly, the early success on Kickstarter was validation that a lot of people see the world that way too.
Well, I actually did run cross country in high school and track for
Okay.
one season. But the interesting thing, Roy, and this is in the 90s, but the interesting thing is that I don't think I was ever coached on my running form, like really kind of articulate coaching on my running form. And it wasn't until, and I think you and I have spoken about this before, but it wasn't until I was 30 and I couldn't get rid of the injury bug, right? So then I actually looked at my form. And then I switched to wearing Newtons for a couple of years. And Newtons kind of shifted my form from being actually a heel striker, believe it or not, to a midsole striker. And that changed the game for me. That, along with incorporating recovery, understanding things like my cadence, my ground contact time, all of these things were actually very difficult to quantify. They were hard to capture, but they were even harder to make sense of. And I think that is what Avelo provides, and which is why I got so excited about it. Um, but no, I would agree. I think that running is easy and it's accessible, but understanding load, understanding form. Look, there's even some data which I read recently that heel striking is not necessarily bad for you either. Like if
It's
you're a
not.
heel striker runner, it is not bad for you. And
No.
there's this whole couple of decades where we went through saying that you have to be a midfoot striker. A lot of it depends on biomechanically on how your body's responding to it. That's the key thing. So clearly for me, heel striking didn't work for me. Doesn't mean it's not going to work for you. So I shifted my form to do that. I think now with the Velo, when I still have not had my pairs. I'm really excited to go get one.
We're a few months
But I know
away.
that
Yeah.
a few months away, I cannot wait. I will be the first one in that list. But I think the insight, even as someone who's been running for 30 years, I have a lot to learn, right? And then that's the key thing is even though you are a seasoned runner, there's a lot more that you can unlock from your running.
100%. And running form is a touchy subject because there's a lot of opinion about running form. The evidence is a little less clear in terms of what is the optimal running form. And I think the one conclusion, or one of the conclusions I can say has been reached, and I can say this really confidently, is that there's not one correct way to run. So you hit on one of these misconceptions that people think there's one correct foot strike pattern, right? So forefoot striking for a long time was seen as the most efficient and correct way to run. But you watch some elite runners and they're heel striking. And so it's not that one is better or worse. It's just that they're different. And so there's a lot that we can help runners better understand, and we can educate runners about the way that they run. And that has tremendous implications on their performance, and also maybe what injuries they're at a particular risk for, and how they can be proactive about preventing those particular injuries. It's providing the runner with information and knowledge so that they're smarter about their body, about their running, and they can make smarter, more informed decisions when it comes to running. That's the ultimate goal.
Well, Roy, we are at time, and funny enough, I'm actually going to be going out for a run here in Chicago as soon as this podcast is
Awesome.
done, and be
Enjoy.
thinking about all things Avelo. But we like to wrap up with the key takeaways. And Matt, I'm going to start with you. I know you love to run, but I wouldn't say that you are a competitive runner. You view running as more of one part fitness, but also just the pure enjoyment of running, and you've incorporated it as part of your lifestyle. But any key takeaways from this episode, and is it going to have you think about running differently?
Yeah, it is. Like you, I don't really place running as being something I'm particularly into. But as I was preparing for this, I realized that probably for as long as I can remember, you know, my decades, I'm talking, that it's been something I've done at least 4 to 5 times every single week. And I'm only like 20 minutes. I'm typically 20 to 40, and I average around about sort of 5K. So it's not a lot, but it adds up as being pretty consistent. And I've gone through all the different niggles of, and I've for touch wood, I've not had anything that's really done any damage to me. But just as I get older, being aware that this is, as you said, this is repetitive contact with the ground on a regular basis. I think I've definitely underinvest in my shoes. I just go online and look at the popular brands and pick a nice color and I order that. So I think I really need to understand the shoes and what it's doing to my joints and things like that. And secondly, just being aware of what I should be tracking, because I'm similar to yourself, Rory. I measure as much as I can. I've got a bunch of different devices and I always like to see how I'm doing against previously and have some sort of baseline. And so I think with my running, outside of my heart rate, which I always track, I'm not getting any useful metrics. So I need to really take a look into your product and figure out what other sort of things that I should be optimizing for and starting to take my running at this stage a little bit more seriously. What about you, Mo?
Well, I think one, Roy touched on this, is everyone's got an opinion on running, whether it's running form, whether running is bad for your knees, which data is actually showing that it's not bad. It actually helps your knees. It's not bad for your knees. If you're running correctly, how do you hydrate? How much do you train? So everyone's got opinions, I think, because there is a lack of data around running. And it is a mystery. So I think now Roy's right. Like, this is a convergence of one globally. This is not a US phenomenon. I mean, I was traveling in Asia last week. I saw a ton of people out running. This is a global phenomenon. Materials, which is the next big thing that has now really evolved in the last 15 years. And then finally, technology, right? And we haven't even touched on AI and what AI ultimately is going to be able to say for the data. And I know Royi Avelo's got an AI coach in it too, which we didn't really talk about today, but I'm excited about. So the convergence of all these things is going to help make running accessible to more people. And of course, we are starting with this premium product with Avelo, but ultimately it's going to head more down market. I think it's going to help people run longer and more safer, and also help people improve their running in general. Because one of the key, and everyone agrees on this is not for dispute, but one of the key indicators for longevity is improving your VO2 max. One of the best ways to improve your VO2 max is by running. So I think that this is the right product for the right time, and I just can't wait to get my hands on the first pair. Roy, any key takeaways for the audience?
If you're a runner and you're interested in getting smarter about your running and having more information to make better training decisions, and you want to learn more, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me on LinkedIn. You can email me at royi@avelorunning.com, and you can go check out our Kickstarter, which is live for another 10 days. One thing that you guys sparked a thought in my head, which I honestly, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it, is what role do gyms have to play in this running boom? And it's not something I've given a lot of thought to. I don't typically go to the gym to run. I go to the gym to lift weights, but there's probably a role for gyms to play in this running boom and supporting runners. And, I think there's probably applications of our technology for treadmill running that could make treadmill running really interesting, right? More entertaining, more engaging. And I think that's one of the reasons why many runners like me don't love to run on the treadmill, because it's a little bit more boring for me than running outside. And maybe there's ways to make that more entertaining by streaming data of from what's happening on your feet to the treadmill or vice versa. And so I think there's an opportunity and I think there probably is a role for gyms to play in this running boom and really supporting this next wave of athletes who are obsessed with running, either for social reasons or with performance goals related to running. And so that's not something I've thought of very much recently, but it's something that you guys sparked that thought for me. So it's something I will think about.
Well, Roy, thank you very much for your time. As Mo said, we're going to have to get one season. Are they actually on sale now, or you have to order them through the Kickstarter and you get them that way? Like, where are you with the product?
We're pre-orders. So we used Kickstarter to take pre-orders. So that's the main way to get it now. And the Kickstarter is only running for another 10 days. And after that, at some point, we'll start taking pre-orders on our website. Okay, great. So you hope to be in selling these by what, the end of the year? Is that the goal? We're delivering our first batch. The target is September. Excuse me, December. December 2025, and then next batch would be in the spring of 2026, and then at that point we'll be selling them regularly online.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for joining us, Roy. Keep us up to date with the progress. When they come out, maybe we'll do maybe the three of us will go and have a run and in a park somewhere and test them out. So thank you very much for your time. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please give us a like and a share so we can get this message out to more people. Thanks very much for listening.